Okay, make sure I can forward my slides here. Nope. 1 second so we can get you the starting page. Okay, there we are. So I wanted to start off with, again, just saying thank you for coming and trying to sort of give you an introduction to Jeff and I. This is a project in Castro Valley that's very much homegrown, and there's no real separation between special ed services and general ed services. We work a hand in hand with the same kids as a great team in our district. So Jeff and I will be bouncing back and forth, but maybe wanted to start with just a little bit of introductions for both of us so you know who we are, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty of social work. So again, my name is Marian Meadows. My district title is Coordinator of Behavioral Health. I started as a counselor in the district and got some great projects that I was able to do, including building our social work team and building out wellness centers at our secondary schools. And then also this year, we brought a health clinic to Castro Valley High School. So it's all part of this continuum of services. I also like to say that I'm a parent in Castro Valley. I have 2 teenage girls. So please send me all the good vibes that you can. One is graduating high school and one's coming into high school. So that is, I'm definitely what do they call it? A participant observer. I'm both raising teenagers and trying to make services for teenagers and younger kids too. So that's me. I got my social work degree at San Jose State University, right down the street, about 45 minutes. A great program, loved it. And then I got my administrative credential through Cal State East Bay. So I'm a school administrator and a school social worker. And so I've always worked in schools. So that's kind of the perfect combination. So that's me. I'll pass it over to Jeff, my awesome colleague here. Go for it, Jeff.
Great, thank you, Marian. Can everybody hear me or no?
Can hear you.
Okay, great. Hi, good evening, everyone. So my name is Jeff Mosier, and like Ms. Macy said, I am a ERMS social worker. ERMS is a fancy acronym that's used for educationally related mental health services. And our social workers in the district, no matter what level they're at, if it's general ed or special education, we all do some form of educationally related services for our students. I am, I think, 4th year now in this district. I'm also a Castro Valley resident, like many of you. I have students in the district as well. I have a 6th grade middle schooler, and I have a 10th grade high schooler. So very invested in the work that I do. I think Marian and I have a unique position in both being parents and both being service providers to a lot of our families and students here in Castro Valley. I graduated from Cal State East Bay with an undergraduate in sociology. My main focus was on the social service option, which is kind of like their social work degree at the undergraduate level. After that, I went on to the UC Berkeley Master's Program for social work. And as we get into the slides later, I do have a little fun fact that I don't want to spoil early on, but I will definitely let you guys know when I get there. Yeah, so that's about me. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, so you're going to hear sort of professional stuff, and we might throw some, kid stories in there too. But we know that us parents and this parent group, we know that we're working very hard all the time. So lots of empathy and learning together with all of us parents. So I'm going to move us forward a little bit. Just if little factoids kind of about Castro Valley, our district. We are unincorporated. As many of you know, we're not a city, so we don't have a city government. There's no mayor. There aren't like taxes levied so that we can pay for things like in other cities in our area. So we're technically part of the like Castro Valley, Eden, Cherryland kind of strip of land that is unincorporated. So our services come from the county, like local, sheriff's department, EdMUD, those kinds of things. So we are kind of a unique little pocket. We're next to Hayward. San Leandro is our buddy. If we go over, or our neighbor, if we go over the hill, we're in San Ramon, Dublin. So we're in a little pocket here. Castro Valley Unified has over 9,000 kids, 2 high schools, a big giant high school, Castro Valley High, and a tiny alternative high school, which is Redwood. We have 2 middle schools, 1,500 kids at Canyon-ish, and around 700-ish at Creekside Middle School, and then 9 elementary schools. We also have a tiny preschool, and we have an adult school. So those are part of kind of nice additions to all the educational opportunities we have in our district. And we have 3 schools that are considered Title I schools. So that means that if you're a Title I school, it means that you have over a certain percentage of kids that qualify for free and reduced lunch. So those are CVE, Marshall, and Stanton. And I just want to note that both Jeff and my family are Marshall Mustangs. Both of our kids, all of our kids went to Marshall. So it's a great school. So we love to shout out our Mustangs at the elementary level, which is fun. Okay, just a little bit more information about our demographics in Castro Valley. Our student community is very diverse. Our family community, very diverse. You can see the comparisons between Alameda County and Castro Valley. But we are every year more diverse, more richness, just more great families and kids to learn from and learn from each other. So that's an exciting movement in our district. Okay, so that kind of sets the stage for our community that Jeff and I live in, and many of you live in. Our schools are a very important part of the infrastructure of Castro Valley. I call it a town because it's one of Castro Valley is also Castro Valley Unified is one of the larger employers in the area, along with the hospital. So the schools create a very important sort of infrastructure for not just educating the kids, but also keeping our community really vibrant. So when we start to talk about our students and how we educate our kids in Castro Valley, we talk about it as tiers, a tiered level. So you'll hear this kind of catchphrase. It's called the multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS. This means kind of levels. If you see at the bottom, we call this tier 1. And that means we are aiming for healthy development for all. So tier 1 means things that we give all students. All students get excellent instruction. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So it means every student in Castro Valley at tier 1. Tier 2 is what we talk about when kids need additional either small group support, or they need it taught in a different way, or they need something repeated. Then they get tier 2 instruction, and it's not necessarily a special ed service or a counseling service, it's instruction as well. So teachers provide tier 2 instruction, just like we provide tier 2 level supports. And then tier 3 is much fewer kids. It's sort of it's the level where students are getting in addition to tier 1 and tier 2, they're getting tier 3 level services, which is intensive, but there are fewer kids that we give intensive services to. So that could be an IEP, that could be a special behavior plan. It could be a very special or specific academic plan for youth. It just means that there are fewer kids at that tier 3 level. So we're always looking at these 3 things, three ways of serving kids.
Can I add one more thing, Mary?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. Yeah, please jump in.
Yeah, so as our students move through these tier systems, some that reach the tier 3 level, it's not that they're always going to be at a tier 3 spot. It just means that in that moment, for whatever situation they're in, they've been identified as a student or a group of students who might need more intensive and individualized attention to get them back to tier 2, to get that targeted intervention support, and then eventually back to tier 1. So when students move up to that tier 3 level, it's not a permanent spot for most folks. It's usually just because it's very situational, and then they do end up bumping back down.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. That's very true. And students can be doing lots of things at tier 1, and they have one thing like speech. They need speech services, or there's a situation where a family pet dies and they need support at tier 3 for just that, but everything else is happening at these other tiers. So yeah, it's just a way to think about the types of instruction and services that we provide in our district. So thank you for that, Jeff. That was a great addition. So as we move on, we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about behavioral health, and then on the tiers, so you can get a sense of what happens for all kids, what kids get in addition when it comes to behavioral health services. And Jeff and I will talk a little bit about what is unique for special ed students in special ed, or unique for kids in the general ed program. But most of this is things that we all do together. So when we're talking about tier 1, for behavioral health, largely it's provided by the school community and the teachers. So tier one, again, that means things that all students receive. One is, of course, safe and welcoming school sites. That's a given. Each schools want to have positive relationships with families. We know that's really important to kids feeling safe and welcome on campus. Excellent instruction, both academic, and then in our district, we have social emotional learning curriculum for all kids, all grades. And we also offer anti-bias, anti-racism content, all levels, all grades. So that is a really important part of the tier one program over the last few years to make sure that all of our kids feel included and welcomed on our campuses. We also have something called school-wide positive behavioral interventions and supports. It's called PBIS. So if your student came home with a ROAR card, that would be in middle school. That's an example of oh gosh, Jeff, is that Creekside or Canyon? Creekside roars.
That's
Right?
Creekside. Canyon's is store cards. Creekside's is roar cards.
That's right. And they did that on purpose. So ROAR and SOAR is an acronym that explains the positive kind of attributes and behaviors of students on their campus. So if a student comes home with a ROAR card or a SOAR card, it means that they were showing that positive behavior. So all schools in our district have some version of that. There's Pride, there's their Trojan tickets at Cass Valley High. There's all kinds of different, they're Cougar Paws, all different kinds of PBIS versions that we support, again, that all kids are taught, all kids participate in. And it's how we build really positive school climate on campus. And then I also added in here something that social workers do is provide child protection lessons at kindergarten and third grade every year. So it's kind of like stranger danger, safe touch type lessons. So to make sure that all kinders and all third graders get some special time to think about how to keep themselves safe, their bodies and their feelings safe. So all students receive these services, and we're not even really at the social workers yet. Did you want to add anything, Jeff, as far as tier one?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Thank you, Marion.
Okay. Yeah, of course. All right. So that's tier one. So just really quickly, we don't have a chat. The chat is turned off, which is okay. I just kind of wanted to, bring this into our mind about what kinds of behaviors we're noticing as parents, right? Concerning behaviors or things that you're noticing, either that are happening at school or at home. Generally, let's see, it's spring, starting to be spring. I have a senior, and there is serious senioritis going on with her. She's like, does this grade really matter? Does this class really matter? There's a lot of this sort of kind of weighing whether or not to put the effort, kind of motivation things that I'm seeing that I haven't ever seen with her before. So that's an example of a behavior at this time of year. When you talk about middle school behaviors right now, the schools talk about, teachers and staff talk about there being a lot of energy right now, a lot of like relational energy. Kids are really ramped up, exciting, because the spring, right? It's like everybody's kind of coming back to life. So there are behaviors that happen in sort of a seasonal way that as school people, as people who work at schools and us as parents too, kind of know to expect just because of the time of year or the things that are happening. And then there are other behaviors that we may not have ever seen our students or kids exhibit that come up that we really want some support with. And that comes up for a whole variety of reasons happening with family or injuries or, other causes. So it was just a way, this doesn't have to be in the chat, but just a way to kind of think about, what's coming up for my student or my kid at this time. So this list is an example of the things that we are very used to seeing at the schools. Jeff and I and all the other social workers, our whole social work team deal with these issues every day. So they can include really crisis-oriented things like homelessness and needing basic needs. A lot of stress and anxiety is a pretty common one. Issues around gun violence and substance abuse. Kids, figuring out who they are as an identity is not necessarily a bad thing or a dangerous thing. It's just kids are thinking about this stuff. These are really common areas that we talk to kids about. So sometimes parents will come and be like, I'm really, I either feel hesitant to talk about these issues, or maybe they won't know how to help our kids. We definitely talk about these things all the time with kids. Jeff, are there any like ones we should have bolded for you that you're talking with kids about? I said
Uh,
stress and anxiety, but
yeah,
yeah,
it's generally a lot of stress and anxiety. It's
yeah.
depression, it's the PTSD. I work with students who have a lot of trauma in their history. So, noises and, tight rooms or in cramped spaces could be a trigger for some
Hmm.
folks.
Hmm.
But it's pretty much the spectrum of things that we do talk about, because some students will land in a few of these categories, and some will, like I said, they kind of bump out of them, being in that tier 3 level and then coming back down. So, yep, I do see a lot of students in that area of
Yeah.
stress, depression, anxiety, PTSD.
Thank you. And I was going to add to family changes, right? Those are things that we all have families. Families go through changes. And there are things that kids often just need support in the transition. So it's kind of a short-term support. And that's what you're talking about, Jeff, about being tier 3 for a little bit and then settling and being able to get support on the other sort of layers. So again, family change is happening a lot too, because that's real life. So these are all common things. If your student is dealing with these things, don't be afraid to come forward and talk to us about how to support, or any social worker for that. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about our cost process. So what happens is when a student needs more support than at tier 1, and tier 1 is usually, social supports in the classroom, or friends are helping take care, or the parents feel pretty like the student's able to pretty much manage the feelings that are coming up. Sometimes when we need to go to kind of a next level to get some more people involved, for behavioral health in particular, and for the social work team, we interact with a process called COST. So it's Coordination of Services Team, COST. And each school has one. It's a team of internal staff that figure out what the best sort of next step is for a student to get either additional support or an outreach to a parent, and it can be academic or behavioral. It doesn't have to just be behavior or social emotional stuff, but it's a process to help kind of get started, get the support started. So I won't read all the details here, but you can kind of see the big categories. There are pre-referral interventions. So that means, teachers are often trying things for a while. And if it doesn't seem to stick, or they need more of something, then they get referred to COST. That's this blue one, referral to COST. The next step is triage, which just means the coordinator for COST is looking at the referral and figuring out, okay, what's the best next step? Is it just to call the parent? So that happens a lot. Sometimes it's, okay, we do need the team to get together and talk through what the possible supports are that we can offer the student and family. So that becomes the COST meeting. They determine the next steps, and then linkage to services. So in our district, that could be something like a linkage to services could just be calling the parent and letting them know about, a summer opportunity or something like that. Sometimes it's an internal service where there's we call them RTI staff, but they're literacy coaches, basically literacy staff, and maybe the student just needs more time with that person. Sometimes they need to be assessed for bigger sort of social emotional issues. So that's where the linkage happens, where there's a person who's assigned to do that service delivery, and then there's tracking and follow-up, where we're looking at progress on whatever that service was. So these teams meet every week. Jeff is on multiple ones. Right now, I only go to Castro Valley High School, but they're processes that were introduced probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, and no school has ever stopped doing COST. It's just a process that works and really helps to get services to students. Jeff, anything to add? I know we'll get to this special ed part of it, but you're on
Yeah,
many of them, I'm sure.
I'm actually I work at many sites, so I'm invited to a lot of cost meetings.
Yeah.
Pardon me. I think another thing to also remember is that the cost process at the high school and at most schools is a weekly process. So there are students that we talk about on a weekly, not every student every week, but we do bring up students who are of concern that have made it to, pardon me, that have made it to a level of, I guess, that have been identified as a student who might need some of these processes and linkages to service. So we do talk about them on a weekly basis, and we generally have a running agenda and a running meeting.
Correct. Yes. And sometimes we need to talk about kids more quickly than once a week, right? When there's crisis, and that team having worked together is able to really quickly get supports for the student. But it's at least once a week, and it's turned out to be a really effective process for sure. All right, so that's cost. So again, we see behaviors that maybe need more support than what can happen at the tier 1 level in the classrooms. We refer to costs, we get some services running and figuring out whether or not those are support. And again, there's no difference between special ed and gen ed at this point. This is all tier 2 partnership going on, which is how we like it. So at tier 2, so that's the coordination services team. I'll tell you a little bit about the other possibilities at tier 2 that are just kind of small group offerings. Check in, check out is an example of a small group intervention where kids get a point card, but it's for positive points. It's not for like monitoring, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. It's a card where we're marking and rating how often they're showing the positive behaviors, and it's linked to incentives. So check in, check out is a great process. All schools offer group counseling and supports, all different kinds of topics. I'm trying to think, Cass Valley High right now has anxiety and girls empowerment. There's a trauma group, definitely lots of groups going on at the middle school level, many different topics. So groups are something that are really, really successful intervention. Because kids like being in group and they learn from each other, and it builds pro-social bonds. So group is a great model. And then we also have wellness centers, and I'll definitely have Jeff jump in here because he works at all the wellness centers too. So at the wellness centers are at all secondary sites. So secondary is middle school, our 2 middle schools and our 2 high schools, which is really exciting. This year we opened the 4th one at Redwood. So let me show you some pictures here. This is kind of fun. Oh wait, almost some pictures. So the wellness centers started, the first wellness center was at Castro Valley High School, and we were in portables for a while, and then that's where Jeff and I met. And then a beautiful new building got built right before COVID. So we threw our boxes in there and left for like a year and a half. But we are now fully moved in. We've been there for 3 years. And then after that big wellness center got settled, then we expanded to Canyon and Creekside, and then Redwood just opened theirs this year, which is super exciting. So it's all the same model. And the things that the wellness centers kind of consistently offer across the board are crisis response, breaks. And I wrote often in IEPs and 504s because often there's something that's specifically needed for kids with needing a plan. So breaks are often written into the IEPs and 504s at the wellness center. And then they offer all different kinds of counseling, individual counseling, group counseling, a lot of collaboration, do a lot of parent outreach, resources, those types of things. And so the wellness centers are staffed by the social workers and the social work interns. So Jeff and I both supervised interns this year. We've both been interns because all social workers are interns. But these wellness centers have become a great place, not just for services for kids, but also partnership with families and staff, and a great place to learn, right? To learn how to be a social worker. So these are really fun. I'm going to show some pictures here. I know I put them in, so you can see what they look like. So these are the 2 middle school wellness centers. You can see the inside. The one on the left is Creekside. That's just one of the rooms. They have a huge space, which is amazing. And then Canyons, you can see the inside of Canyons, very cute. They are moving into a brand new, it's not a brand new building, but it's brand new as a wellness center. So they're moving into a much bigger space next year. Very excited about that. And this year, 22-23, each school served over 300 students, which is a lot. When you consider how many, it's like 10 classrooms worth of kids. It's a lot of kids. So there's lots of traffic, lots of stuff going on in these wellness centers. And Jeff, are you at both of these centers, or I know you're on those sites a lot?
Yeah, so I do work out of the Canyon Wellness Center when I'm at Canyon. And at Creekside, I do have my own office. So that's where I'm currently housed. So I do not work out of the wellness center there, but I do support the wellness center staff and social workers in there a lot. And like you said, Marian, it is a high trafficked area. There are so many kids that go in and out of there because it is so safe and it's welcoming, and kids can thrive in there and they can just be themselves, and it's in a supported way.
Great. We love having too many kids. It's a good sign. It's a very good sign. So those are the two middle school wellness centers, and then I have the high school wellness centers. So the one on the left is Redwood. They just opened. They're brand new. So it's in a portable that used to house the counselor and some other staff. So now it's behavioral health staff, and it's like kind of a long hallway, but with some really great seating supports for students. So we were very excited about Redwood. And then this is the one on the right is the Castro Valley High School Wellness Center. Again, that's the brand new building, kind of the mothership. Jeff is definitely staff there, and that's where my office is. And this last school year, we served 652 students, so it's like almost a quarter of the high school came through the doors. So these are pretty high traffic places, but it's great. It's great because they're also not they're this. There's not so much stigma attached to them because there's just a lot of stuff going on in there. There's community closets, there's circles, there's groups, there's check-ins, there's snacks, there's breaks. It's a pretty active place. So so far, I think our reputation is not one of stigma, but more of service and supports. So that's a good sign. So those are we wanted you to be able to see them, at least the outsides of these wellness centers, and some of the insides are just really fun. Anything to add there, Jeff, before we head into special ed specific stuff? I did want to just note that, again, everything up in the presentation up till now has nothing to do with the kids, IEP, not IEP, 504, whatever. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's never a barrier to service. All kids can access everything we've presented up till now.
Yeah, I think one thing I wanted to mention is that 652 number, that's unduplicated students, right? So a lot of those students are, they frequent the wellness center, could be on a daily basis or a semi-regular basis. So 652 is the unduplicated number. There's
Correct.
so many students in there.
Yeah, that's right. It's like thousands of visits. It's like we don't even really count them anymore because there's so many. Yeah, and like you said, Jeff, 652, there are students with IEPs. We don't really even count that. We don't know how many kids with IEPs come through really. And other plans, other parts of, half days and all kinds of things. So all the services up till now there's never a barrier to access at all, which is great. That's how it's specific. It's on purpose. So okay, so that's kind of the big picture. And then we're just going to take a little time to talk about what's unique about Jeff serving as a special ed student or a social worker who works with special ed students or students with IEPs. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the unique things about working with students who don't have IEPs and have other plans. So we'll kind of split up for a little bit that way. But that means you're on, Jeff. You're next.
Great, thank you. So my slides, you might need to click through a little bit, but I'm going to stop you right there.
Want me to go back?
No, that's fine. We can leave it up now. Great. And I am battling a cold, everybody, so apologize if I do have to clear my throat a little bit. I definitely wanted to make this meeting and present all of the wonderful things that I do as a social worker working in the special education area, and also uplift a lot of my colleagues' work, because what we do really does intersect a lot. And a lot of the stuff that we talk about will be duplicated, right? So things that I might say now, Ms. Meadows might be repeating a little bit later down the line, just because social work in essence is things that we do to have positive outcomes for students, depending on, and it doesn't depend if they're special ed students or general ed students. So by definition, social workers are mental health providers, right? They're professionals with a unique knowledge and skill related to the school system. And they provide mental health and behavioral health services to students in collaboration with school sites in which they work. So school social workers aim to enhance the young person's experience while they navigate the intersections of their academics, their home, their school, community, identity, social influences, because we all want the outcome of them to achieve success. Special education social workers like myself work with students and families and other support to the student who are generally at the tier 2 and tier 3 level. Those are the ones that Ms. Meadows had mentioned earlier, that pyramid where it talks about students that receive some intervention and then some that receive some really specific interventions. And generally students, when they reach that level, they've been assessed in the special education area and qualified for that service and its related services. So my position as a social worker here is to engage students on multiple levels, but not limited to like individual counseling. I provide the group counseling spot, risk and safety assessments, basic need screenings, substance use, prevention, parent outreach. I help the student or family access resources in the community. And we also work with district office administrators and program specialists to determine the appropriate level of placement to meet the needs of a student, while keeping in mind that we want to ensure the least restrictive environment possible so that kids can be with their gen ed peers as often as possible. At times, though, more restricted placement is necessary, and I will get into that as we get down further. Currently, pulling this from data that I have, we have about 1,200 students that are eligible for the special ed program. That's K through 12. Actually K through 12 and the adult school students. And we have 122 pending. Right now, there is only one of me, so I'm the only social worker, and I work at multiple sites. I'm specifically in the secondary area, so both middle schools, the high school, and at times I'm at Redwood High School. And I work in conjunction with all the behavioral health teams at all the sites. So the psychologists, the case management teams, the school admin, teachers, family, outside therapists, sometimes non-public school staff, and residential treatment center staff as well. So educationally related mental health services are mental health services for students who qualify for special education. The ERMs support students in their social emotional needs. They can also help to improve the student's academics, behavior, and overall well-being. The ERMS process is individually tailored to a student's need through their IEP, which is an individual education program, and through goals that are written specifically for that student to achieve. Some of the things that we'll get into are going to be in the next slide. So IEP counseling is generally added to a student support plan when it's appropriate to help a student access their education. Students may have counseling services to address a range of topics, or to address like a counseling goal that's been written, as I mentioned before. And usually this is discussed with team members in an IEP meeting and signed by the parent or guardian. So we cannot start services until we have consent from a parent that we are able to begin those services. During those sessions, social workers are also working with students, and they perform safety and risk assessments based on any disclosures. So that first bullet point there, the IEP counseling, individual group crisis and safety. Because social workers are mandated reporters, right? So if a student discloses something that is a detriment to their safety or the safety of others, then we are required by law to disclose. But up until that point, every service and every topic is a confidential space for students. So the risk and safety assessment may also warrant a CPS report or an assessment for a 5150, which is an involuntary hold. These are parts of my job that are they're the hardest for me, if I'm being honest. The caseload management, in its essence, is time management and organizing. So that second bullet point there, and documentation. So a bit about my work is that I have the ability to work with students. And one of the things that I like to do is work with them to find the best times to pull them so that I don't have to impact their education. Since a lot of the services that I provide has to be through the school day, it means that I do have to take them out of a class, and that removes them from education. So the third bullet point, family work, is really a broad term, right? It's used to describe family engagement, supporting their student. And this can look like special education social worker setting up check-in meetings with parents to assess if there have been any changes in the home that could impact their student. Meetings can be via phone, they can be virtual, they can be in person. It's also a good way to assess whether families might be in need of like basic resources, referral services to community-based organizations that specialize in a certain area. Because we are a school-based provider, Our focus is pretty eclectic. It's not very specialized, meaning that we can process and help a lot of students in general terms, but some students might need um, a specific area of need that just can't be housed in the school-based environment. Family works can also entail home visits. I will get into that a little bit later, but home visits really meet the student and family where they're at in an effort to understand what barriers the family is facing. It's usually done at the request of a parent or in response to family disengagement, or if we notice a student's attendance has just fallen really far and the student is really not coming to school, or it's really hard to reach the parent, we might want to elicit a home visit to see, how we can help intervene in that way. Family work is also known as like social work services. So if it's written in an IEP, it's not written as family work, it's written as social work services. And it's typically with a bank of minutes that I can access and help a family with social work services. So we mentioned cost meetings. I attend numerous cost meetings. I also attend IEP meetings and I attend CFT meetings. Cost is a term for the general education meeting that supports students. IEP meetings is specifically for special education students, and CFT meetings are specifically for students placed at residential treatment centers, so therapeutic boarding schools. And if students are placed there and I'm part of that team meets pretty regularly, about once a month, to update on to get updates on how the student's doing. IEP meetings are generally annually, and cost meetings we have weekly. So teacher and staff consultations, it's a big part of what social workers do as staff. And it's important for a variety of reasons, including sharing relevant information to teachers and students. Like I said, I work with students who are ones coming from a long trauma history. So being in a class and having their hood up might be a way that they can tolerate being in a classroom. And some teachers might not understand that right away. And then ask them to take their hood off, which can cause a conflict. So my job is to help facilitate the most peaceful diplomatic solution that supports the needs of the student, to have them in class so they can access their education. And if it's talking with the teacher to say the student does need to have their hood up, but they'll keep it, away from their eyes, they'll have it up, then, that's what I will do. Social workers may also be involved if there's like behavioral issues with students in a classroom, or if there's a behavior intervention plan, which we call a BIP because we love our acronyms. So what a BIP is generally a plan to support a student's behavior. So if they start showing signs of escalation in a certain area, then the team is aware of ways that have been talked about with the IEP team, including the student and the parent, to help de-escalate that so the student can stay in class and access their education. We'll also collaborate with school administrators if there are disciplinary actions involving a student in special education. In this process, I'm generally acting as a student advocate between the admin and the incident and the consequence. And this is kind of like the case for both general ed and special ed. If there's a consequence that involves a student and administrators, and a social worker is working closely with that student on a tier 2 or tier 3 level, it's generally best practice to add the advocate if possible to help mitigate some of the long-term effects of what a consequence might look like for a student. We also work with psychologists. We work with our CELPA partners, our non-public schools, and residential treatment centers, much in the same way we do with other staff, collaborating on the best ways in which to see our students on our caseload succeed. So one more click, Marion. And like I said before, it's really all about the relationship. So think about a time when you were trying to get some information from somebody and you didn't like that person. Like, how hard was it to hear that? And how hard was it to understand what they were saying? So the same goes for social workers. If the relationship's not there, it's really hard to engage a student. It's really hard to engage a family. And sometimes relationships break down, but we do try to build those up as strongly as possible so that we can help support the students in all aspects of their life. We can go to the next click. So this is just social work services continued. We do conflict resolution and restorative practices. That's something that social workers and gen ed and special ed do. Um, Often working in school, students will be involved in disagreements and things escalate. So social workers may be involved in the restorative dialogue between students so that they can move past the escalation. The conflict resolution and restorative dialogues can be between two students, can be between more than two students, or it could be between students and teachers, or there's been harm caused in the classroom. So it's not just peer-to-peer, but it could be peer to staff. The home visits, like I mentioned earlier, but I'll just say a little bit more here because it is so important, is just another way that we try to meet the students where they're at. You know, if a student has services on their IEP and they're not coming to school, it's really hard for them to see progress if they're not engaged with that service. So oftentimes I will, in coordination and collaboration with our school admin team, make a home visit, attempt some calls, and if I still get no response, just do an unannounced home visit to see if I can not scare the family or student, but really just to be a support, just to show them that we haven't forgot about them, to see what ways in which we can help get their student back to school in the most supportive way possible. And sometimes it doesn't always have to be mental health related. It could be, you know, basic needs, like they're having trouble with their car. They can't find a ride or someone to take their kid to school or pick them up. So that's a challenge. So they just opt to take their kid to school. So what we do is we find ways to support student engagement back to school, whether it be through like exposure therapy for students who have like school avoidance, or referrals to outside communities, outside community organizations. I'm sorry. So in my role, there's always students that are placed at the comprehensive school site. So like all of the schools you mentioned, like all the elementaries, Creekside Canyon, the high school, those are technically what we would call a comprehensive school site, which require a higher level of placement. After all interventions have been exhausted and implemented, and there's been shown to be very little improvement to the student's ability to access their education. So when this happens, the IEP team, which I'm a part of on a lot of students who are on my caseload, or all students on my caseload, but some students who are not as well, we discuss alternative settings. And these could look like our non-public schools in the area, and they could look like residential treatment centers, which are those therapeutic boarding schools, just so that the students are able to get the support they need in a safe way so that they can access their education again. And this is really that tier 3+ area, because very few students we do recommend for non-public schools or residential. And it's always meant to be a temporary solution because we do want them to reintegrate back into the school and we do want them to graduate with their class. And we supervise interns. One of the things that we love to do, since we are a center that is on an education setting, is we like to help teach the next and upcoming school social workers kind of what the job looks like. So these students are in MSW programs looking for field placements. So social work is such a broad field, and there's so many specializations. For school social workers in public schools, we need like additional background checks and specific credentials in order to work with your students. Our internship program fosters a learning environment for our graduate students who may be interested in becoming school social workers down the line. And here's the fun fact. I think it's going to be 2 clicks. Oh, wait, I didn't put the fun fact on the slide. I'm sorry. But the fun fact was that about 4 years ago, I was also a social work intern. That's where Miss Meadows said that she met me. I was in my 2nd year field placement at the Castro Valley High School Wellness Center as it was getting started. And thanks to centers like the Wellness Center and students who access it and the great social workers to collaborate with, I made the decision to become a school social worker.
Yay, I love that fact.
And that's really it for me, guys. Thanks for listening to my raspy voice.
That's great. Great job, Jeff. Jeff is very humble, but he is an amazing social worker and a partner. So as we talk about the general ed social work services, it looks almost unfair because we have a big staff. But Jeff is part of our family, our social work family, and we partner really heavily with him because of his expertise on the special ed side. So just really quickly, the gen ed social work services, again, this is the whole district. Includes 4 elementary social workers, 2 at the middle school, 2 at the high school, at Castro Valley High, and then 1 at the alternative high school. We have a half-time district social worker who helps coordinate our cost coaching and support services for our homeless families. We have a coordinator, that's me, and then we contract with some folks to help with supervision because there's so many staff who some of who want supervision, and then we also have 9 MSW interns this year, which is our biggest crew ever. Jeff has one of them. I had one of them the first semester, so we have a really big crew this year, biggest ever, and it's all to support along both elementary, middle, and high school. So folks are placed all across the continuum. And I'm keeping an eye on our time, so we have just a few more slides. This is just a little bit about the training that social workers have, and it's true for Mr. Mosier and for, and if you're SPED or general ed or both, just around the training that social workers have. One is that all social workers have master's degree in social work from accredited universities. There's a lot of really great universities right in the Bay Area with social work programs. So they have to have a master's degree plus a pupil personnel services credential, which is a special school, it's like basically a school counseling credential. Plus, many of our folks have a license, so they're licensed clinical social workers and or are working towards their licensure. So it's a very highly trained and educated group of folks who do this work. And again, like Mr. Mosier and so many of our colleagues, just real experts in this work. So again, Jeff mentioned, our job is to think about how to support a student in the learning environment. And also we have a lot of training in clinical services, so we can provide therapy and think about how to help students be successful in classrooms, on school campuses, and in the social environment. So it's all great work. I won't go through these. A lot of what Jeff mentioned is true for the gen ed social workers too. Some things to draw out is that we have each of our social workers specifically case manage a group of homeless families. So every school has, that might range from 1 or 2 families to, I think it's over 30 at Castro Valley High School. So the social workers' jobs are to manage and support and to really give resources to our homeless families. Jeff mentioned restorative practices and community circles. We're very much all about that process and that involvement. And again, just like any social worker, we provide crisis prevention and intervention when students are coming in crisis. So it's, again, we rely on each other a lot to make sure that students are getting the support they need, and that we are partnering with families during those things, making sure families are part of the process. Just a couple more slides here. Wanted to just talk about how we fund social workers. In the state budget, there are a certain number of academic counselors that have to be hired for a certain number of students. For social workers, there's no ratio. So there is no requirement to hire social workers for the general ed program. And Jeff will have to talk to the special ed program. So what that means in Castro Valley is that our board and our superintendent have prioritized social work in our district. That's why we have such a robust team. It's not required by the state at this point. That might be coming down the line, but we've had steady support for over a decade building this out. So the funding, we look at, local control, the local control funding formula is where a place to find dollars for this are Title I dollars. We have a grant for SB HIP. We're looking to the state to be able to bill and be reimbursed for some of our funds, the funds that it takes to hire social workers. And then our interns are a great source. We have 9 amazing people this year that are, we offer them really small stipend. And we're always looking for grants and outside funding and trying to make sure that this team of folks, and every district is, right? Once you have a social worker, you understand how valuable we are. Each district is always looking for how to continue to fund the work. So those are just some ideas. If you're interested in finding out more, or even talking to a school site or site leadership about social work services. We didn't want to leave you without some resources. We work on a parent Padlet, or parent resource Padlet every year. We're always throwing stuff in here. I wanted to make sure you could see it because I knew this was a parent training. So the link is, I might be able to grab the link and put it in the chat, but the link is here. And it's a great just resource around development, relationships. You can see the titles, the titles of each kind of row, but just some great things to read and you know, ways to think about how to support all of our kids. So my last slide is just to say thank you, and also our contact information. So again, I don't know if you knew this, Pam, but it is School Social Work Week, the National School Social Work Week this week, and your timing's perfect. So it's fun to be able to just kind of, you know, bring our message to the world and say thank you to our colleagues and thank you to the leaders that continue to prioritize these types of services. And also to always say thank you to the kids and the families, because they're the best part of the work. We stay in this field because we love it, and it's the kids and the families that are the most rewarding part. So thank you for inviting us, and we're open to questions if folks want to ask any.
You know, as we went through this highly comprehensive presentation, we really appreciate your time and all your efforts and passion, obviously, in what you do. We know how important social workers are, clinical social workers, but it's very interesting, if it's not something new, but a reminder of your educational background and your roles and responsibilities, as we said, the topic, you know, within a school setting, because oftentimes folks think of hospitals rather than school-based. So highly informative. I did have a couple of questions. You both seemed to answer them as you went through. But one of my questions, when you talk about cost process, is that just, you know, aligning it with the student success team, and that it's a pre-refer under the umbrella of pre-referral, so that intervention strategies are tried over a period of time. The law doesn't tell us what that specific time is, unfortunately, with data taken to determine the efficacy of those intervention strategies. So is that what the cost is, which I think of it as SST?
Yeah, I can speak to that, and I know Jeff has a lot of experience on cost too. Yeah, the idea is that the cost is kind of an internal meeting that happens first to figure out if SST is the right way to go, or if it's just parent outreach, or if it's a seating change in the classroom. It's meant to be, it's kind of a pre-referral process. Some schools run cost as pre-referral and have an SST track that's separate, that's mostly just kind of for academics. So it depends on the site, but cost is really meant to be a pre-referral process, so that we're making sure we're sending this student to the best intervention possible in sort of a chronological order. So Jeff, you want to add to that, how you've seen it?
I've seen it in much the same way. The cost process supports the need for a student to engage with like an SST. So when a student's been identified as needing that level of support, it's usually assigned back to the academic counselor, so that that counselor can set up the meeting between the student, parent, and themselves, and maybe even some teachers, to figure out ways in which they can support the student in the classroom. And oftentimes I've seen SSTs evolve into 504s, and then those evolve into IEPs.
I see. And then I had another question. When you talked about that tier 1 for all students, right, in the wellness centers and connection to the wellness centers, you also, and correct me if I'm wrong, talked about, you know, group counseling in those wellness centers. So that isn't something, is it kind of a drop-in? So it's not something that's structured because it's not special ed. Is that correct?
It tends to be both. So we offer kind of both. One, I'll just tell you the real story. In the beginning of the school year, we host a coping skills group every day, because something always happens at lunch. And so 5th period was like, okay, we got to have coping skills. So whoever came or, you know, had a hard time at lunch, we could support them during 5th period. So we call that an open group. And then there are also closed groups where where students are referred, and that specific set of kids goes through 6 to 8 weeks of group counseling. So we have both versions, and I know Jeff has run several of the groups too.
Yeah, the groups that I've run through the wellness centers have been outside of the IEP process, but they've been more focused towards special education student referrals mixed in with some gen ed peers. Generally, when a plan for counseling is written in a student's IEP, it'll specify whether or not it's supposed to be individual or group, and then that's what we need to do. So generally, most of my students are individual, and those individual students might need some group counseling. That's short term and brief. So we might recommend them for the outside of the IEP group counseling, and they get parent consent that way.
I see. Thank you. Are there any other questions of Jeff or Marion?
Hi, this is Michelle. Glenda Nardine, who is our CAC chairperson, has her hand up and has a question. Go ahead, Glenda.
I'm unmuted now. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Marion. You are fabulous. I can't tell you how much you do for schools and how much you do for children and families. My question is on the behavioral of self-destructive behavior. I know that you come across it a lot, but I've come across it in my career a lot as a registered nurse. And the bottom line is when you ask somebody, especially a child, if they know what self-destructive behavior is and where it goes, most of them don't. And when you try to explain to them how their self-destructive behavior hurts them even more than what they're trying to express, they're not expressing it the right way. And then the dominoes fall, and then they get in more and more trouble. And I'm not in Castro Valley Unified School District, but there is, I'm hoping this spreads. So bottom line is, I know that you probably come across it, you probably touch upon it, but the most important part to me is a child understands why he's doing the self-destructive behavior, because he really doesn't, and he doesn't know where it goes and why. So I know you get in touch with that all the time. So my question is before it leads to suspensions and expulsions and even worse on that domino trail, what are you doing? Where does that fit into your reach? Because this starts at the elementary level, it goes middle school, and it goes to high school. So where are you tracking and where is this going? And then the final thing is outreaching to the state for funding, grant writers, and federal lobbyists. I have done that. I have served on a school board for over 15 years. I've served as a city council member for over 8 years. And I know that if you contact them and say, when are you going to Washington, D.C.? I'd like for you to take this to a lobbyist in the Capitol, and I'd like for you to lobby for this purpose, for mental illness, special services, special education, whatever you feel is the priority. I did it as a city council member, and I got funding for a grant writer for a school district. And we were able to move forward with that grant and be able to secure other issues. So I really would like to have your opinion on those two things.
I can take a stab at that first one about supporting a student like in the classroom with self-destructive behavior. For students who are in special education who have like oppositional defiance behaviors, generally they start out with like a classroom support plan. And I think that might be the same for general ed students as well. But typically when students have a lot of outbursts or they've been coming up a lot against like discipline or suspensions, we will try to write a behavior intervention plan for them. And what that does, it identifies the targeted behavior, so the antecedent, what the behavior is because of that, and then what that consequence or what the after effects look like, in order to try to find ways in which we can work a plan with the student to help de-escalate them in that moment. So sometimes a behavior support plan might look like a student who is starting to have an outburst. They might be like rocking in their seat a little bit, or they might be like pounding on the desk. So that's a sign for the teacher, whoever's in the classroom, or whether it's a para, if the student's paired with one, to follow the behavior support plan, which could look like maybe reminding the student to focus, or it could be, let's take a step outside, or let's take a stretch break, or let's work with fidget in order to help minimize the effects of that behavior. Not always successful, but it's definitely one of the routes that we like to go, and it is written in the student's IEP.
Right. Sometimes they're in there. Other times it's a kid is just so angry about whatever the situation was, especially like at elementary school, they'll go in and tear up the bathroom, plug the toilets or whatever, so they're so angry they don't know how and they don't know why. So nobody's gonna really see that except for maybe a janitor. And the bottom line is unless it's reported, because it's self-destructive behavior. I had an example of a child who was playing basketball during PE, and he found out the kids were not throwing basketballs to him. And so he went over, sat by the fence, put his knees up and put his head down on the knees and wouldn't look up. He was angry, but he didn't know what at himself, what happened, or anything else. So everybody has to be able to know the signs of self-destructive behavior before they continue to grow, because the next time he may not do that. He may say, I want to go to the bathroom, and then I'll tear up a bathroom, plug up a toilet, etc. And then each time it escalates. So is there teaching to the staff, everybody, about signs of self-destructive behavior and why?
I think Miriam might want to take that one. I'm not sure if there's something specific for like a tier 1 that goes out to all students via teacher. Maybe Miriam has that answer though.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Glenda, for the questions. I'll speak a little bit to the tier 1 level when it comes to staff. So I mentioned our social emotional learning curriculum. Students get, we call it SEL. They get that curriculum every single day at elementary level. So 30 minutes a day. And what it does is it helps and the teachers teach it. So as the teachers are teaching the students, they are learning about what it looks like when a student is starting to feel distress, right? And that what we've found is that as the students have become more aware of social emotional learning, like, oh, go ahead.
They've frozen.
Am I frozen? Uh-oh.
Yes. I mean, there you go. Good.
You can see me? Okay, sorry.
I can hear you.
Oh, good. So I was just saying, as we've been bringing curriculum to students, the teachers are also learning because they've been teaching it. We've done it SEL lessons for 10 years. So it's been a decade worth. So there's that piece. And then we also did this year specifically, we did training on, it's called trauma-informed classrooms. And that was a way of teaching teachers. It was our big professional development day. We did elementary and secondary, one, I think at the end of last year and one at the beginning of this year, so that elementary and secondary teachers understood what trauma is, what it looks like in the classroom, and how to create a classroom environment that helps students feel safe and welcome and comfortable, and also how to manage those feelings as they come up. Instead of seeing it as a disciplinary issue, they see it as a social emotional issue, right? And something that we need to meet very calmly and with kindness and compassion, right? So we've worked a lot in those ways around teaching kids about emotion regulation, and then teaching teachers about how the environment impacts their emotion regulation. And so then the hope is that we are seeing fewer self-destructive behaviors because kids can name how they feel, and that teachers are more aware of what they're seeing in order to meet the kid with compassion instead of a disciplinary response. And I think that's good for every kid in every classroom. Right? Does that answer the
great
question? Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
We have another guest who would like to ask a question. Princess, you want to go ahead and talk?
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I'm just asking if we could get the slides for tonight. The presentation. That's all. For
The
those of us
slides?
that attend. Yeah, the
I'm
slides.
happy.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy to send it to Pam, and Pam, you can send it out to the group.
I can put it on our website. I was going to ask you if I could do that.
Absolutely.
Along with the recording of this. I would
Sure.
put it out for people who missed it and the slides.
Absolutely.
Presentation.
Thanks.
So send
That'll
it
be
to
all.
me.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay. Monique has a question. Go ahead, Monique.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can
Oh.
hear you.
Great. So I have a question. Say a child in elementary school already has an IEP, a BIP, and all that. and say, you know, they work through most of everything that is on the IEP to assist them in any type of behaviorals, maybe possibly similar to the Defiance one,
You're
or the
frozen for a
oppositional
minute
one.
here.
Oh, can you hear me? Hello?
Yep,
Yes,
we can hear you.
Oh, okay, sorry. So say
Hmm.
say that's all done and everyone does everything as according to the IEP, to the behavioral intervention plan. What are your next steps if none of that is working and there's still behavioral incidences going on for like a small child that is possibly like non-verbal, non-speaking, or moderate to severe in an SDC class? What would be the next steps for that?
Yeah, so that is a great question because, you know, oftentimes young people do come across these strong emotions more than their neurotypical peers. And then what do you do when we've exhausted all the interventions? We've written a behavior intervention plan. We've assigned some counseling to the student in an effort to understand and coach and teach social emotional learning to them. And if that still hasn't worked, then in one of my other slides, that's when the referral process might have to happen. And it's not because we want to remove a kid from their environment. It's just because the environment in which the kid is placed is not conducive to their learning. So a higher level of support may be needed. And like I said, you know, when they reach that level, it's to get them the support they need for that moment. And then when they're ready to step back down, because the IEP team will meet very frequently, when it's time for that student to step back down and everyone agrees, then we will make every effort to do so in a very supportive way. So students who may be in a comprehensive campus may be recommended to go to like a counseling enriched classroom, and then from there go to like a non-public school or a residential treatment center, depending on the behavior and the level of need.
Okay, great. And I'm just curious, you're just part of Castro Valley's district, correct?
Correct. So
Yes.
I'm employed by Castro Valley Unified, and my emphasis is on secondary sites, but I do support some of the elementary school psychologists.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Nope,
Okay.
nobody else.
No. Well, we want, Glenda, go ahead. I know.
I have one other thing to say. I'm sorry.
Oh,
If
Michelle.
anybody out there has not filled out the sign-in form, it's in the chat box with the link. If you could do that, I'd appreciate it.
I
That's
know that we all want to thank you again for this, as I said, highly comprehensive presentation for our workshop. We really appreciate it, and I'm speaking for everyone here today, and I know for Glenda, our chair, who asked a couple of questions. We appreciate that as well. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Go
for
ahead.
having us.
Thank
Yes,
you, Pam.
thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Good
Good
night,
night.
everyone.